With that, next up is Freedom Dreams Co-operative Education. They're a cooperative development and an education hub that shares knowledge and resources about cooperatives and the solidarity economy from intersectional Black, Indigenous, and persons of color perspectives. Susanna Redekop is co-founder of Freedom Dreams Co-op Education and a project manager for the Canadian Community Economic Development Network, leading initiatives for social finance. As the former communications coordinator at the local food and farm co-ops, she spent 7 years supporting the development of food co-ops and farm co-ops throughout Ontario. Previous roles include engagement manager for the federal government's investment readiness program and communications manager / floor manager at Wested Food Co-op, which is where I believe I met her. Playing a key role in opening Toronto's first multi-stakeholder food co-op and co-managed the store until its closure in 2018. Susanna holds a BA in anthropology from the University of Toronto and an MES from York University, where her thesis examined the Canadian cooperative sector with an intersectionality and cultural inclusion lens. Building on a solidarity economy, Susanna lives with her husband and 3 children in a housing co-op in Parkdale and is a board member for the Neighborhood Land Trust. Susanna says, "Our vision is to see communities of color launch cooperatives that create equitable, sustainable, and dignified employment, contribute to the economic development of their communities, and foster equity, diversity, and inclusion within Canada's co-op sector."
I realized that I'm actually going to be speaking on behalf of 2 cooperatives that I have worked for, since I was actually asked to speak also about farm cooperatives. And so I have spent, like was mentioned, 7 years on supporting the local food and farm co-ops, which also meant helping to develop farm cooperatives and food cooperatives throughout Ontario. So just under present, okay. Then present. Magic. Okay, and so if I want to do slides, I just go to the next one with the key. Oh, look at that. Okay, amazing. So as I was saying things. So yes, this is me here, and I have been doing this work for quite some time. I've seen a number of different things, happening within the cooperative sector, and I think especially after the pandemic, during the pandemic, a lot of folks were recognizing the power that cooperatives have to be able to put agency into people's hands. When we saw big box grocery stores, that everybody's in their lineups, when we see the way that a lot of labor, for example, is seen as very dispensable. Cooperatives are a way to be able to safeguard against a lot of those things. It was interesting to me to see that a number of our cooperative members, some of them, their sales actually went up significantly in the co-op. There was a farm co-op that we were part of launching that in 2019, the group of farmers in northern Ontario, or northwestern Ontario, Kenora, Dryden, Red Lake area, and within that type of cooperative, each one of those farms was doing small scale producing of beef. And obviously you want to be able to scale up so you can have a livelihood that is worthwhile for those farmers, but it was tricky for them to produce the volume while staying at their quality of small farming. So what they did instead was create standards for all of them to follow under the umbrella of Northwest Beef Co-op. And they all had the same certification process they went through. And so therefore, together, whether it be from Wolf River Farm or the Dene Farm, they're able to go under one brand as Northwest Beef Co-op. And take that to the local shops and such. And also they partnered with local abattoirs to be able to have all of that processing stay local. Since a number of, especially Northern Ontario farms, were exporting to Alberta because that's where the market was to be able to make it work. However, before the pandemic, it maybe was not as economical, it was more economical, but it was less convenient to buy 25 pounds of ground beef for your freezer. Why do that when I can walk to Sobeys? But when all of a sudden things got very restricted and it's very difficult or scary to go into the Sobeys and the Walmarts to be able to purchase your food, all of a sudden having 25 pounds of ground beef to go into your freezer delivered straight to your door contactless sounds like a pretty good deal. I'm still on this slide. So, one thing I did want to say about myself is that I really do enjoy co-ops. I dig co-ops a lot. I have co-founded a number of different cooperatives and also solidarity economy type organizations, including the Parkdale People's Economy with the steering committee and the beginnings of the Parkdale Neighborhood Land Trust. But now talking about cooperatives. And co-ops are a business structure that have a values and community focus. And a main factor of how co-ops serve their members and collectively make decisions is a big part about what sets them apart. So here's a bit of some information about how cooperatives and not-for-profits are different from each other. You can have a co-op that is not-for-profit. You can also have a for-profit co-op, in which case it means you have shares. Not-for-profits, obviously you can't do that, but you can have charitable status if you have a not-for-profit instead. Also with cooperatives, it's really member-based, member-focused. One member, one vote. There's a certain set of regulations that you need to follow that is in the Cooperative Corporations Act, whereas not-for-profits can be much more flexible in that way. And also the cooperatives are subject to income tax. However, some dividends, if you have a for-profit cooperative with shares distributed to members, those are deductible from the co-op's taxable income, whereas not-for-profits are exempt from tax on earned income. I have some stats here about cooperatives in Ontario, as well as cooperatives throughout Canada. But I'm going to also give you these slides so I don't have to read them. One of the great things about cooperatives is that you do have a lot of support networks. So here are some that are applied to cooperatives in Ontario and Canada. If anyone's interested in starting a co-op, I highly recommend getting in touch with the Ontario Co-op Association. Cooperatives build communities, and that's really an important part about having a cooperative is that it's really something that fills a need in a community that members decide this is what they want. It's not being fulfilled by the private or public sector. And also it fills gaps, nothing mentioned that, and it provides that ownership to people who really want or need that service being offered. Co-ops actually do have a higher success rate. Part of what I was talking about earlier with that ability to be flexible, when the pandemic hit, the co-ops I'm thinking of that had actually gone up in their sales and needed to increase staff, that was because it was decided upon the members. What did they want to see? How did they want to change their business model? Instead of having a cafe and grocery store, now they're doing delivery. Now they're doing a contactless delivery by bicycle to your door. There's lots of flexibility when you are only accountable to your members who then can make those kinds of decisions. And cooperatives fill needs in not just communities, but also can work well for niche products or services where, again, there's a market to be able to solve that or solve a certain problem in a community. There's lots of different types of co-ops, and I'm only going to go through a couple of them that are related to farm cooperatives. So worker co-ops, the different types of cooperatives happen to do with who's the members. So in worker co-ops, the benefit is obviously the livelihood, it's the job, it's the work that you're doing together collectively. Often the best benefits are about, what is your living wage that you're able to pay people, the benefits that come with health benefits, for example, and making these decisions together about your livelihood. These are some examples of worker co-ops. Beatbox is a farm co-op that prioritizes its workers as their membership, and this specifically is about having that employee ownership. Also, you can have producer co-ops. So producer co-ops are owned by the people who produce those services or those goods or services. When I had my store, I had West End Food Co-op, which is a grocery store and community kitchen. We had workers who worked in the store who were members, and we also had members that were producer members, so those whose products we were selling on the shelf. And obviously, those two different kinds of categories of members have different and sometimes competing interests. But that's also what was needed in the neighborhood to be able to bring agency to that, to our organization, to our business, but also bringing those products from the farmers directly. Which brings me to multi-stakeholder co-ops. Because we had more than one member group, that meant we were a multi-stakeholder co-op. This is the type of decision-making structure within a classic cooperative. You have your members, which get elected to the board of directors. They make decisions about the cooperative, but also bring big decisions to the membership. They hire management and staff, and again, it feeds back because all of it is because of and for members. These are the 7 cooperative principles. So all co-ops follow these principles. This slide is actually borrowed from my work with Freedom Dreams Co-operative Education. So as mentioned, we are an online educational space focused on the histories, our existence and resistance of Black, Indigenous, person of color-led cooperatives and cooperation, supporting the next generation of BIPOC folks looking to start cooperatives. And we also have a free webinar series. If you're interested, I can send a link to that too. So in terms of, I went through some of these already, with our cooperative values and principles, this is what some of the things that set us apart. Building on some of these solutions with principles of justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, focusing on this connectivity, connection with meaningful relationships with members and local actors, local food actors. Another big piece, which goes back to some of the principles that are here, are also about the sharing, education, and training. Part of being part of the cooperative network is that you have access to a lot of that. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. There's lots of great things that work, great models that work, and there are tons of organizations that support co-ops that share all those pieces. And now we are on some of the pieces about building successful co-ops. And just lost my slide, but I'm getting it back. There we go. And how am I on time? Am I okay? Should I be done? Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So yeah, I think I mentioned a bunch of these things already. One of the things to note is that to start a co-op, starting with three people at least for your board of directors is important. That's according to the actual Corporations Act for cooperatives. And again, tapping into that cooperative network, you always will have that support. Principle 6 is about cooperation amongst co-ops. We like sharing, we like being cooperative. And one of the key things is about how you make those key decisions together. Practicing consensus-based decision-making, whether it's sociocracy or other ways of making decisions together. And some best practices include trying to reach and recruit a wide range of people to be able to add to your skill set. Meet people where they're at. You never know what someone can bring to the table. And one of the main pieces is that if you come together with people who are all interested in the same goals, you're willing to put in the time and effort to get to a place where you can have your cooperative, you're much better off than just one person saying, hey, I just don't want to be the sole owner of this. Will somebody share it? It's got to be something that everyone is willing to be able to put in the time and effort towards. Oh, and also involve the youth, because once they grow up in knowing and understanding and being a part of co-ops, it just becomes part of what they want to do, part of what's, the fabric of their life anyways. That's it, those are my resources.